Welcome back. So, got pretty lucky. There's a pad right here on the torque converter to thread a bolt in it, so I don't have to try to turn the torque converter inside the transmission. I just need to rotate the crank to match up with that. Right there should be good. And I've got some blue Loctite that I'm going to apply onto these torque converter bolts or flex plate bolts. Just a drop will do you. They did have some sort of Loctite from the factory. It looks kind of green, so I assume it was low strength, because these, I broke these loose with just my hand. Alright, so first one's in. I'm gonna try to be quick. So all I've done is run all of these in by hand with blue Loctite on them, and now I'm gonna grab the ratchet and run them in with the ratchet and make them snug, and then put the torque wrench on them. These get 30 foot-pounds. I wasn't sure if I could fit it in there, but I can. That's all 6 snugged up. Get this one in line. Get the torque wrench on it. Alright, there's 30 foot-pounds. So there is nowhere good to get on this thing. Alright, cool. The steering rack is in the way, so I can't come up from below. The oil pan right here is in the way, so I can't come in straight, and then the torque wrench is actually too long. It actually hits the frame. Okay, plan B. I'm just gonna make them tight. Yep. Alright, torque converter done. Just make sure, just like I said in probably the second video, take the wrench that you had on the crank off right away. You don't want that flopping around. Okay, so now I'm gonna grab the inspection plate cover here and some NECs. Pop this guy back together. This will be the most NECs I've ever used on a single project. Perfect. Alright, so now engine, torque converter completely together, everything's connected. Now I can throw in the drive shaft. Alright, so we're gonna tap the oil pan for the sending unit for the new gauge. I just jumped on eBay and found a gauge that I liked. It happened to be a Marshall gauge. Super old school. I mean, it's just real simple. Single wire temp sensor and 2 wires for the illumination for the LED backlight. I like the style more than anything else I could find, but I'm not a big fan of these single wire temperature sensors. I just think the 2 wire ones have a lot more accuracy. So anyway, this is 1/8 NPT, so it's tapered threads. I'm going to take a measurement from the surface here down to the top of the boss, and then mark it on the outside. Alright, just getting a rudimentary measurement here. Looks like we are 3 1/4 to the top of the oil pan. and just eyeball this. Okay. 3 1/4. So that's about the height. I'll just do a sanity check here. Yep, that's about the height of that boss. And then the overall depth. Looks like we're at 4 1/8. Down here, flip that around. 4 1/8. That's approximately the zone we have to work with. Let's do a sanity check all the way down to the base. About there. Yep. Okay. So that's our zone to work with. Width-wise, it looks like you can see the rib here. That's the that's a landmark we can use on the inside and outside, and our boss ends right there. So that puts us ending about here. So I'm going to drill it just to the left of that. Okay. We'll clean it up. It's just starting to snug up. That is pretty deep, but there is a gap there, so it should be able to just get enough in there, and with the thread tape it'll fill in some of that gap between the threads and the actual between the threads of the housing and the actual sensor. Alright, so now when you're doing thread tape, think about it, you know, righty-tighty. So if you're starting in this direction, if your cut point is to your left, then your finish point will be to your right. So when you start turning, the finish point will start folding and unfolding. So if you start with your first cut point to the right, when you finish, your ending cut point will be to the left. Then righty-tighty, the left-facing cut point will just mat down and start sealing the threads properly. So you really don't have to go nuts on these, especially when you're threading into aluminum. 1 or 2, right? 2, 2.5 to 3 passes is all you really need. And I have had a couple of situations where 2 or 3 didn't do it. I had to do 3 or 4. There was just a little bit more tolerance between the sensor and the hole that I was threaded. But those things happen, and the only way to really address it is to know after it leaks. I mean, by default, you can go a little bit extra. I'm gonna give this a feel and see what I think, because of the tolerances here. I'm gonna go a little bit extra, because that barely felt like anything was engaging. All right, should be good. Now for the level sensor here, or not sensor, but level plug. and the drain plug. Well, the drain plug has a washer to sealing, or for sealing. That's this guy right here. And then the fill or level check plug. They actually say to use thread tape, so this is a tapered fitting. I am not going to put any thread tape on it until it's time to actually seal this up for good. So pan's installed, oil level's good, then I'll run some thread tape on this guy. Otherwise, I'm just going to be taking the thread tape right back off as soon as I go to fill it. So now this pan is ready for installation. So I was feeling a little uneasy about this guy. Something didn't feel right because it got snug, but it didn't get super tight like I normally feel in a tapered fitting, an MPT fitting. So I dug through my stash and I found a crush washer that fit the diameter of the fitting, and then I put more thread tape, just like before, or fresh thread tape rather, and that I think is gonna seal a lot better. So in this method, I'm not really relying on this crush washer to provide the sealing, to provide all the sealing. I'm really relying on it just to give a face for those threads to bite down and engage, and then the thread tape is what's actually going to be sealing it. It's just, like I said, something didn't sit right with me, but this feels a lot better, torquing it down. And if it leaks, we'll have to come back maybe with one of those crush washers that has a rubber liner on the inside, and just have to find one with the perfect diameter to fit there. But that should be a lot better than just the thread tape. So I was dealing with a really old, cheap pipe thread tap. If you're just doing simple things and easy to, stuff that's easy to fix later or repair or replace, cheap taps are fine. But after this experience, I'm going to buy a nice tap. At least, I use these on almost every project that I work on, so it's worth it now to me to buy a nice one. And I think that would help shore up the tolerances here. That, and plus the associated drill tap. So I'm gonna buy a combo if I can find one. I think those two things will really help avoid this type of scenario in the future. So, pro tip: buy the right tools. Welcome back under the truck. Time to pull this pan off. Alright, a little bit of fluid came out of the valve body from priming it. Was expecting that though. Not a big deal. Just wiping down the gasket surface. And I'm just going to throw one of these bolts in place just to get it up and onto the transmission. Now, this gasket seems like it's going to be a fighter, so hopefully I can get it without too much of a fight. Okay, so now we're ready. That direction. Alright. Awesome. Alright, now I'm gonna get some hardware ready with some washers and some anti-seize. I almost need really long 5mm for this because the diameter of the socket is a little too thick. Alright, so that's just snug. I'm going to back this out just a little bit. And go to the other side. I'm going to keep on bouncing back and forth until they all come up. Alright, so all the bolts are snugged down with an Allen key. I used this Allen key with a round end on it, just to make it the angle, the approach angle here easier. The Allen key that I had, or the Allen socket that I had, the diameter was a little too big and was interfering with the pan here. So I'm gonna go run down to the store and grab some of those sockets they have the long. They basically are that long, and then they have the socket on the end. Grab some of those so I can torque these down properly. Otherwise, that torque wrench may, it's not going to be perfectly straight up and down. It's going to be off to the side, and then you run the risk of either damaging the hex, the internal hex of the bolt, or not getting a proper torque rating on this. And I mean, it's all aftermarket, so you're going to get so perfect with it. But the closer to a factory, clamping pressure on that gasket, the better, in my opinion. Alrighty, so had to drive all over creation to find some of these long hex heads. I got one. Torque spec on the Oil Pan's manufacturer says 7 to 8 foot-pounds, or 6 to 8, somewhere in there, and go in a crisscross pattern. So let's start with this guy right here. Alright, that's all the bolts torqued down. I'm totally digging this giant oil pan. I'm excited to get this thing filled and running.